My name's Scott.
I'm Belinda.
On Maryland Station, Kirragundi, between Cobar and Louth. It's about 15,000 acres.
We're running approximately 200 stud ewes, then our young rams, and then we're running just shy of 1,000 commercial Dorper ewes and lambs here with whatever goats are coming in and out of the property. We ended up purchasing the property just before Christmas 2016, and then 2017 we hit the drought. We were pretty much in drought then from 2017 through to 2021.
I think the country was quite scalded too, I suppose, like from the stock and also like from the drought, you know, like there's a dust storm every second day, and then when you did get a bit of rain, once you got over 6 mil or whatever, it seemed to stop soaking in and you could just see it all running down into the gullies and disappear.
Being dry for so long, there was no vegetation there at all to hold anything together. And then you get these massive flooding rains. Like as Scott said, you know, we were getting rains of 60 mil in half an hour. It just does a monumental amount of damage. You know, it just cemented in our head that we needed to be able to get plants established that even during the drought were going to hold the topsoil there. And not until we did the ripping that changed everything for us.
Sort of rip it as deep as we can, probably ripping between 150, 200 mil, sometimes deeper. Well, I like to rip it when it's dry because you can see like it all fractures between the rip lines. If it's wet, like it seems to be easy to rip, but it just sort of smears its way through and it doesn't actually fracture up the ground. So it's better to rip it when it's dry and reasonably hard. Massey Ferguson 1085 that was on the place when we bought it, and the ripper was here as well. The gear was sitting there and Belinda sort of wanted to have a go at planting some stuff, planting a bit of buffalo and whatever. It felt good to bust up a bit of dirt, and then we got something to grow there and away we went. We did some ripping on our own and we had a bit of success there, and we had a few other farmers come out and look at it and some people from the department, and then the opportunity came from that meeting of those people to do a project together with the DPI. We could see that what we were doing looked good, but it was just to sort of put some numbers with it and attach a bit of science and technology. Yeah, they've helped us achieve things that we couldn't have achieved on our own without their support.
My name's Paul Theakston and I'm the Rangeland Rehabilitation Officer with Western Local Land Services based here in Cobar. In this area, in a summer thunderstorm, you might get 80% runoff rate. So the landholders had already tried things themselves, like ripping. I came on board to provide a little bit of design and technical input to make that project work a little bit better. One thing with the contour ripping that I was surprised to see was how well the country responded with all sorts of perennial grasses. That's a practice that hasn't been done much around the Cobar area, so that provides a bit of promise there.
What we really noticed in the first sort of 6 to 8 months was the amount of native grasses that grew in the rip lines as well. Like that was a really big eye-opener for us. Grasses that we hadn't seen before. We left a couple of rip lines where we didn't put any seed in, and in those rip lines it took at least 6 months longer for the native grasses to get established. There was definitely a massive difference between where we had put the oats and buffalo seed and where we hadn't. By leaving the tractor width between our rip lines, we were actually potentially harvesting all of that water into that next rip line, which was another kind of aha moment for us.
Probably one of the things that we've learned is you've got to obviously be able to keep the stock off, whether it's goats or, you know, keep the stock out of your paddocks. It doesn't take long for the water to start running over your rip lines instead of getting your rip lines and going in. And if you can keep the stock off, your rip lines stay open for a lot longer.
Once we did start getting a bit of vegetation growing in those rip lines, and then Scott did, you know, some later rip lines near them. As soon as they went to seed, you could see all the seed catching in those next lot of rip lines, so it was kind of a flow-on effect. Yeah, it was pretty exciting to come out after a bit of a windy day and, you know, you'd just have these little rip lines that were just absolutely full of seed.
This is the Digitaria here, with that fluffy head there. I'm Sarah McDonald. I'm a pastures researcher with New South Wales DPI based at the Trainee Research Station. So my role in this project has been collecting the on-ground data So this project's demonstrated up to twice to 4 times the amount of biomass in the ripping sites compared to the control areas in the same paddocks, and increases in ground cover up to 50% in some areas. That's a good sign and a target for the region. And already seeing some increases in the soil infiltration and nutrient cycling capacity. It's really contributes towards a better functioning ecosystem, greater productivity, and a greater capacity to capture resources, so water that's falling onto the ground and nutrients and runoff.
This paddock's a really good paddock. It's quite a flat paddock, naturally open, plenty of grasses in good times, but in this particular spot here we had bad erosion that was slowly creeping up the hill, up the gully. And then we put these big diversion banks and they sort of run around here, and then when those ballard trees there, it opens up and then it sort of drops down into another diversion bank or pond, and then it just sort of keeps on into another one, and then it takes the water away from this eroded area and give it a chance to come back.
The other technique that we trialled out at Marylands was water ponding. Now traditionally that's done on floodplain country like the grey soils, but out on Marylands we had a whole heap of scalded country, so I decided to have a trial of that water ponding technique. You need a large machine, like you need a grader, to create a bank that's quite high, at least 1/2 metre high. It creates these horseshoe-shaped banks that pond water up to 10 centimetres in depth, and then it releases that water and that cascades into the next pond. What we've been finding there, the response has been a lot slower than the ripping, but the ponding does have its place where you've got erosion gullies that have intersected that whole scalded area. You need to be able to divert that water from going into that erosion gully and then spread it out and then pond it. So you've got this combination of techniques that we've trialled at Marylands.
The hardest thing initially really was navigating the regulations around Western Lands Lease, and a lot of people are very hesitant about what you can and can't do, and it took a lot of research initially, not so much to work out what we could do, but to make sure that we weren't doing stuff that we couldn't do.
This rangeland rehabilitation work is all about restoring natural processes and the natural function of the landscape. So it's an allowable activity as long as the purpose is to restore natural functions and processes, because it's very important to get it right. Like if you do start constructing earthworks without any design, you can create a bigger problem than what you started with. So it's important to consult with someone from the local land services who's got that expertise.
The people within the department are really, really keen to help. They want to actually collaborate and they want us to do this work, and they're not here to make your life hard. They're just here to really help you get the work done, and we found a real benefit.
When it does rain, if you can really capture that rainfall and utilise it properly, it's really exciting to see, you know, little wetlands are formed and just the country comes to life when you can fix some of the erosion that's occurred. We're finding that it produces massive benefits, not only from the agricultural side of things, but also the environmental side of things.
I'm actually excited for the next drought just to see how it all goes.
Make a dry spell.
Well, yeah. I think it's a realisation that if you put a bit of time and energy into this country, then there's no reason it can't be as productive as a lot of other areas.
Pick a paddock that you can manage to start off with and then go from there.
If you start small and you have some success, then it gives you the encouragement to keep going.